I wouldn't expect anyone to be able to explain everything. That's like expecting like God-like omniscience from this very limited human effort. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say anything, but I would say I would agree. Look, let's just say there's like two extremes. It doesn't say anything, it's not adequate to explain. So it does say something about it. It does not explain everything. Okay, I think that seems to be a very self-evident reality. It does not explain everything. Anyone who says that evolution explains all of this is not correct. To say that it doesn't explain anything is just about as extreme.
There are a large number of biologists, including, well, I don't want, but there are a large number of prominent biologists who would say, or who would lead the public to believe that, in fact, evolution, or in particular Darwinian unguided, unintelligent processes,
I would just say that that's not
to explain all of life.
I mean, depending on exactly what's being said, but if they're saying that evolution explains everything, that's not correct. I don't think the answer is to make another false claim.
Right.
Look, another way, the really good analogy that I heard from one of my friends at Peaceful Science, who's a scientist, is that, we all believe that, the American Revolution occurred. But we can't retrace the steps of every single soldier along the way. Because so when we talk about the history of the American Revolution, it's not a total history. It's only part of the story. It doesn't give us fine-grained detail, and we can generate, large places of large amounts of information. We can draw attention to that by just asking detailed questions. And in the end, we can't really rule out that God wasn't walking among the soldiers. Like, we can't rule out a lot of things that God was doing because we just have such a limited view of the past. And I think you take that analogy, and I think it actually works really well to explain the gaps in our biological knowledge in the past, where we can get some view about where things have happened, but we don't really know how a lot of it happened at the fine-grained detail of knowing how soldiers, walked the paths during the American Revolution,
I think
order of mutations and things like that.
I think that's why Darwinism is such an impediment to science. Because people say, hey, we don't know how something happened in the past. It's really complicated. So we'll just assume that.
Oh, no. That's not what we do. What we say is, so now we're going to form theories about it happen and test it.
By the way, and when we do go to test it, we have to test it at the molecular level, because unlike Darwin, we now know that genetic information is encoded in a molecule, and the molecular machinery is the foundational level of life. And there is no experiment that shows undirected processes can do anything like building the molecular foundation of life.
I mean, I don't want to call you Behe, Mike. It's because your name is common and your last name is Behe. I'm sorry, I mean no disrespect. But Mike, here's the thing. I mean, there's no scientific way to even tell if a process is directed or not. So if we produced I don't know how to tell if God directed the process in my experiment or not. There's no way to do that. In the way how you represent, this is actually something that I believed when I first read your book, but then I actually spent time with biologists and actually started to spend time and I found out it just wasn't true. Isn't that okay? Because it could happen, we don't care, and we're just going to accept it. What they do is, they start proposing different hypotheses and testing them, and it gets really interesting. And that's what I've really enjoyed, honestly, about studying, evolutionary science literature. Not because I think evolution can explain everything, but because by that hypothesis testing approach, they're revealing parts of how God created. They're certainly never going to explain everything. I wouldn't expect anyone to be able to explain everything. That's like expecting like God-like omniscience from this very limited human effort. And, as I understood it, what science really was showing us and how limited it really was, I came to see how actually all the people you're critiquing, Mike, about who have gone out publicly and overstated the claims of evolution, I actually agree with you on that. I think they have overstated it. I just, instead of rather making the extreme argument in the opposite way, I'd rather just kind of be more, kind of take the more, the part that actually acknowledges the legitimacy of both sides.